Good evening. I am creating this video because some of you have expressed a concern about the annotated bibliography and exactly what you are supposed to do for this assignment. So I'm going to go over really quickly some of the key components of the assignment, and hopefully it will help you get a better understanding of what's going on, right? The first thing is you are doing a research paper, and so you first have to understand what research is. On a basic level, research is going to be and is often referred to as the question minus the answer, right? You have some prevailing question that exists, and so you engage in research in order to see what others have said about the question, as well as formulating your own interpretation of your answer to that question, right? Depending on what type of research you're doing, you may be asked at times to come up with your own question and then enter into research in order to find the answer. Sometimes you will be given guides by your professor. Sometimes you will be given very strict parameters on the direction you need to go in. For this assignment, you kind of have some leeway, but it is very structured simply because I've narrowed your research down to two pieces of text, right? You have a sort of a guide because you're either going to come up with a prevailing question about Antigone, or you're coming up with a prevailing question about Medea. And not really about Medea and Antigone, but you're coming up with a question that is built around social commentary. I gave you several different topics that you could consider. You could consider politics, gender, parent child dynamics, the institution of marriage, the role of government, immigration, even, right? So you would come up with a question that is centered around those social issues. Let's say you're going to take up the question of what commentary, social commentary, does Euripides offer through the text of Medea, right? Now, you may say, well, what does immigration have to do with Medea? That is where the research part comes in. You have to read that story, Medea, and use it as your primary text in order to see which parts of that text deal with this particular social issue. In this text, Medea is often referred to as a barbarian, right? Someone who is an other, an outsider, a person who is not really Greek. And so she is treated a certain way, and she also feels a certain way about that. Now, your research could be, well, I'm going to figure out what type of social commentary Euripides says about immigrants. You have to come up with an interpretation of what you believe the text is saying about foreigners and immigration, and how we treat foreigners and whether or not they can truly become a part of society. Maybe that is going to be the angle you want to go into. So you would come up with a thesis statement or an argument that's based around that particular question. You would first then start to research. The first set of research would be to read your primary text, Medea. Which parts of that text deal with her role as an immigrant? You would go through and you would find only those parts, because you are not doing a summary of the entire play. You're looking at how the play deals with a particular social issue. So it would be true that you're only going to deal with certain parts of the play. There's no need to tackle the portion that deals with parent-child relationships if that's not the area of your research, right? So if your research is going to take you into the way that foreigners are treated within that story. You first want to look at your first primary research, primary text, which is your story, and then see which parts of that story deal with her being a foreigner. From reading that part, you should start to formulate an interpretation or an argument that you believe Euripides is making about outsiders, right? Or about the way we accept people who are not like us into our society, right? Then the second part of your research is going to be to go then and see what other people who have also had this type of question, what they have said about this issue. And so you're going to engage in a research for secondary sources, which would be articles that other people have written, particularly maybe about Medea and the role of outsiders in Medea. Or you could look at what some person has said about immigration as a whole, and you could get ideas from there. But whatever research you do, you're going to be engaging in trying to find texts that support whatever argument you are making, right? And so I'm going to go through each of these slides and sort of walk you through what that could be, right? If you don't really have a good grasp on what type of question you want to ask, I put a few in to sort of guide you, right? If you're going to do Antigone, you could think, what argument does Sophocles make about the role of government in the everyday lives of its citizens, right? Because the government is basically, which is in the symbol of Creon, trying to impose their will on Antigone and not giving her the freedom to choose what to do when it comes to burying her brother, right? And so the government steps in and plays a role and sort of forbids her to do that. Maybe you want to talk about that particular issue, the role between the citizens and its government. You may want to make some type of argument or interpretation about that. And then you would look at the portions of Antigone that deal with that particular thing. And then you would go in search of others who have something to say about the role of government and citizens. You could do it as it pertains to Antigone, or you could just do it in general. You could look at how this play explores gender dynamics, Antigone versus Creon. Creon asserting his power and authority over her, not only in the fact that he's a member of the royalty and she is of lower society, also because he's a man and she's a woman. You could also look at the status and the way what this story says about status, those who are in power versus those who lack power, right? How the government basically treats its citizens. Again, you can find any type of interpretation that you want. You could look at look at the story from a feminist perspective. What does this story say about the power or the role of women in society? Okay, so you get to choose sort of what social commentary you're going to research. If you're doing Medea, you could look at these questions. Again, how does this play comment on immigration and our perception of foreigners? How does this play explore the gender dynamic? Again, because it's Medea against these men. What does the play insinuate about the role of women in society? The chorus in this play is made up of all women, and they essentially take the side of Medea because they believe she's been treated unjustly by her husband. So what does this play say about women and solidarity and those types of things? You could also look at the father-child dynamic and how that plays out in this play, and you can also research how that particular issue plays out in normal society, right? So first you have to find a question, because remember, research is the question minus the answer. You have a question, and then you're going to go in search of an answer, and you're going to do that by researching and reading through articles, right? The steps in beginning your research is so then you're going to choose a social issue. And then as you look at your text, you need to start to narrow your topic. So the questions that you're asking are going to be very broad. But once you start to actually think about the story, you're going to narrow it and you're going to come up with a thesis where you're making an argument about what you believe this text says about that particular social issue. Once you do that and you have your text that you've chosen, you have your primary source, your next step is going to be to find valid and reliable sources of information, right? You're going to find secondary sources, right? Now, pay attention to this part because it's very important. You can find 5, 6, 7 outside sources to support that you want to quote in your paper about your topic or your argument. But you only need to put 3 in your annotated bibliography. So if you have 7 sources, I don't want you to have to summarize all 7 of those sources in your annotated bib. Your annotated bibliography has to have at least 3 sources, just the minimum of 3, right? So then that brings to the question, well, what is an annotated bibliography? An annotated bibliography is basically your works cited page. To get your annotated bib, you're again going to use primary sources and secondary sources, right? Again, this is where the research part comes in. You're going to find these sources in your library database. Go to your library online, access it, and then you're looking for the databases that you can use to look up articles over your topics. One of the best things to do is to go in of a search. You could put up politics and Antigone. You could put up gender in Medea. You could put in family and Medea, and all of these different articles are going to pop up, and then you're going to have to search through those articles to find at least 3 that you can use to support whatever thesis statement you're making. Okay, it's called research, so it's going to require a lot of outside reading, because you may find 10 sources, but how do you know if those 10 sources are going to be useful to your question that you're trying to answer? You don't unless you read all 10 sources, right? So you have to read the sources, and then you have to pick the ones that you think best support your argument, right? And I'm telling you, for your paper, you only need the minimum of 3, okay? Now, you need 3 secondary sources. Your primary source is going to be your story. So you have to have your primary source, but you should have at least 3 secondary sources that you found in the library databases that deal with your particular topic. Okay? Now, once you get that, what do you do with these sources? Well, you put them inside of what's called an annotated bibliography. An annotated bibliography is the same thing as a works cited page, except a works cited page only includes the citations. It does not include a summary. An annotated bibliography includes the citation and a summary of the article. Okay? So that is the only difference between the two. Right? So let's take a look at a sample annotated bibliography. All right? So the directions for your assignment, and these directions can be found in your module. If you haven't read through the documents in your module, this may be why you are confused about this assignment. You are going to have to read. There is no way around it, right? So this assignment is telling you to find at least 5 sources. Here it says 5, but really you only need about 3. And this actually may be a different document because this may be for another class, but generally the document is the same. except for a few minor details. I believe your document actually says that you need one primary source and at least 3 secondary sources, right? So again, you only need 3 secondary sources, right? So you're going to do a research in your library database again after you have formed a topic that you want to focus on, right? Once you form that topic, you are going to go through and just find different articles, read those articles to see if the author is saying something that you can use to support your arguments or your portion of your research. Okay? When you find your document, then you are going to get the citation, okay? And you're going to create an annotated bibliography. Now, this is a sample of how it looks, but it is not the exact way I want yours done. For yours, you're going to use this pre-formatted document. And it's included in the module, right? And it is sort of the same as this one with some slight variations to it, right? So your annotated bib is going to be MLA formatted, same way your papers are. Make sure you put your last name here, heading, and you're going to center annotated bibliography. Notice it's capitalized. The only difference between this annotated bib and this one is that I've included a spot for your thesis because I want to evaluate your thesis to let you know if your thesis is correct before you start writing. So here where it says thesis, you're going to put your thesis statement there, right? Remember, your thesis is your interpretation of how this text deals with your social issue, right? Or your thesis statement is going to be about what argument you're making about this social issue. Whether or not you mention the primary text is up to you in the thesis. You don't have to mention Medea in the thesis statement, but you do have to mention the story while you are writing your research. You have to use that story as your primary source, right? There's in your module, there are sections on how to write a thesis statement for this social issue. Look at those samples. Fashion your thesis statement after those samples. It is in your module. Again, you are going to have to read through the documents in the module. Okay. But let's look at the annotated bib, the source. Okay. So let's say we've read this article here. This article is going to support our thesis statement. And you've read the article, then you're going to do a summary, right? Your summary, if you go back and look at the directions here, it tells you what to put in each paragraph. Now, this sample here that I gave you is more for a formatting. You wouldn't look at this sample and fashion your entry after that sample. I want you to use this sample to sort of fashion your entry after, okay? Your summary of your article needs to be 100 to 200 words, okay? You simply summarize the article, what's happening in the article, who wrote it, what their major point is in the article, and then you have to describe how you're going to use this article in your research, right? You do that all within that one paragraph. And the explanation of it is here, right? But this is an okay representation of what an annotated summary looks like. This one is a little bit better as well. I will also put in another sample that a student in one of my courses actually did, and you can read through that one as well. But this is essentially how your works cited pages or your annotated bibliography is going to look. You're going to have 3 citations. You'll notice everything is double spaced. Here in this portion here, you will have your thesis statement. And then everything is just simply double spaced from there. Don't feel a need to have big spaces between each citation. The way that you tell each citation is that it's hanging, okay? Hanging indentation. If you don't know how to do hanging indentation, again, you go up to line spacing. That's going to be this tab here. You click the line spacing. You go to line spacing options. You highlight the portion that you want to hang, and then you're going to go here when you click line spacing options to where it says special, and you're going to click hanging. That is how you hang your source. Okay? All right? So you basically do your research, come up with an argument that you believe this topic is going to address. Then you go to your library database and you do a search of that particular issue: gender, politics, immigration, foreigners, outsiders, whatever social area you're going to focus on. You do a search with that topic in it plus your story. So sometimes when you go to the advanced searches in the library database, it will allow you to put in two different topics at the same time. You can put in Medea, you can put in Euripides, you can put in gender. And then you do a search for those, and it's going to pull up a lot of different articles. And then you have to research which articles are most helpful in helping you figure out that topic. Then you read that article and you summarize what that article is about, and you state how that article is going to help support your thesis. And that is all an annotated bibliography is. You will have 3 of these entries. I only need 3. Even if you have 5 or 6 sources like this sample does, please do not do all 5. I only need to grade 3 entries. So you only need to do 3. Okay? Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If not, just continue to send me an email. I'm going to post this video as well as these 3 documents and this PowerPoint so that you can get a look at them. Okay? If you have any other questions, please email me.